On the 9th of July 2011, South Sudan separated from Sudan to become a republic. President Salva Kiir Mayardit proclaimed on that fine day, "We are all South Sudanese. We may be Zande, Kakwa, Nuer, Toposa, Dinka, Lutuko, Anyuk, Bari and Shilluk. But we are South Sudanese first." 2 years later, the government was trying to ethnically cleanse the Nuer. Hi there, welcome to Veritas Populi. In this episode, we will discuss the genocide in South Sudan. Perhaps it is one of the most complex genocides. It is a tale which has been repeated in many sub-Saharan countries. We will try to examine the ethnic violence taking place in South Sudan, especially the Nuer genocide. We will also try to examine the reasons for this genocide after gaining a background on the other ethnic clashes going on in South Sudan. South Sudan is the newest nation in the world. Formed by a separation between the South Sudanese autonomous provinces and the Republic of Sudan, this was primarily because Sudan was a predominantly Islamic country, while the South Sudanese region was predominantly Christian. When there was a lot of ethnic oppression and subjugation under the Republic of Sudan, a widespread movement began in 1971 from an ethnic movement originating in 1955. This finally culminated into a civil war in 1983 with the recanting of the Addis Ababa Agreement of 1972. After a very long fight with the Sudanese armies, the South Sudanese people got peace in 2005. And in 2011, after overwhelming support in an electoral referendum for freedom, they became independent. The main reason this took place was because of the Sudan People's Liberation Army movement under Riek Machar. South Sudan is a country with more than 60 ethnic groups. It's one of the most diverse sub-Saharan countries in Africa. And yet, in that small region with such great diversity, ethnic conflict was forgotten in the face of larger problems. However, one must not run away with the idea that the SPLA-M was a multiracial, multi-ethnic group. It was also purportedly racial, so much so that many people called it the Dinkocracy, due to the dominance of the Dinkas, the majority group in South Sudan. Just 2 months after independence, a genocide began, and it all began with a Murle-Nuer conflict. It was August 2011. Murle tribesmen attacked the Ural country in the Jonglei state. More than 600 Lao Nuer were killed, 208 children were kidnapped, and 38,000 herds of cattle were stolen. You must be thinking, wait, cattle? And yes, in South Sudan, like in many parts of Africa, cattle are regarded as an important resource, a gift of God to humanity. Like gold and silver, they are hoarded by tribes in South Sudan. In fact, they are so important that for every large purchase made, a South Sudanese would prefer cattle than the South Sudanese pound. They are linked to South Sudanese culture that even children are named after cattle. That is precisely why cattle raids are a very common thing in South Sudanese culture from time immemorial. Initially, they used to take place to balance community power and ensure equality between the pastoralist communities. However, with the advent of modern weaponry and trade with the Western world, South Sudanese cattle raids have grown far more dangerous. In fact, they have even been the cause of many genocides themselves. They have even spurred the growth of organized crime across African nations for the same reasons. Alright, so right now we know the cause and the reasoning behind these deadly conflicts taking place in South Sudan. We still don't know what these conflicts are and how they happen. In other words, what caused the tinderbox of South Sudan to explode? What was the spark? So it all began 2 months after the swearing in of Kiir, when Murle attacked the Nuer. Then, in December of the same year, the Nuer, led by the Nuer White Army, decided, and I quote, to wipe out the entire Murle tribe off the face of earth as the only solution to guarantee the long-term security of Nuer's cattle. While this might sound like a very comical statement since it's talking about cattle, we must note that by replacing cattle with gold or silver, we get the exact same stance of Britain or France in the 17th and 18th century. The Nuer tribe threatened the government and the United Nations to stay out of the matter. However, the United Nations and the government did not heed to such advice and went ahead to try and protect the people. This included ethnically Nuer Vice President Riek Machar. Even with the best of their efforts, they were not able to protect everyone. In an unprotected part of the Pibor state, despite United Nations negotiations by Ban Ki-moon himself, the Lao Nuer struck and attacked the Murle tribe. More than 50,000 people were displaced and 3,000 people were killed in the 3 months of severe fighting. And more importantly, close to 400,000 cattle were stolen, or about $400 million in South Sudanese worth. Similar attacks kept taking place over the course of the next 7 years by the Nuer against the Dinka, the Shilluk against the Dinka, the Fetit Juer against the Dinka and each other. It keeps going on. So let me begin at the beginning. 2013. Machar was the Vice President of South Sudan, and he was removed by Kiir, the President. This caused the government and Kiir, backed by the Dinka tribe, to target the ex-Vice President Machar, who was backed by the Nuer tribe. This led to far greater crimes being committed on both sides. Abduction, slavery, torture, rape, and yes, murder increased manifold. Statistics of these events are not available, but according to the United Nations mission to South Sudan, or the UNMISS, more than 50,000 people were killed within the first 3 months. 120,000 people were displaced, and many thousands more were without shelter. The Ugandan army even intervened on the side of the government. However, this did not stop the human rights violations. Crimes rose to the heights of sexual violence being used as a weapon of war, and due to stigma, women had to suffer from unprotected and non-consensual sexual violence like rape. Child soldiers were used in contravention of international law, as well as suicide bombers. In 2015, under pressure from international agencies such as the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, Kiir and Machar signed a peace pact, and Machar was once again given his role as vice president. This pact was very superficial and degenerated almost immediately. By 2017, the government was once again committing atrocities. A United Nations commission declared that ethnic cleansing was taking place in many parts of the country. And as we all know, ethnic cleansing is just a euphemism for genocide. This claim was, of course, hotly debated by the government. A famine, called a man-made catastrophe by the United Nations, was officially declared in 2017, and more than 5 million people in South Sudan were in risk of food insecurity. The high fragility and instability caused by these episodic wars was the cause of this famine. Then once again, in 2018, President Kiir called for national dialogue and unilaterally declared a ceasefire. They signed a pact, and within 36 months, they were beginning a transitional government. But hang on, it's not over yet. Though this happened, fighting did not cease. Although, by 2019, they had formed a committee to amend their constitution. Yet, in 2020, yes, last year, Riek Machar became the vice president and was sworn in. Security, accountability, and gender equality clauses brokered in the peace deal were not kept, including the 35% gender equality norm for representation of women in the government. In fact, the situation is only escalating. Throughout 2020, the region of Greater Jonglai has been racked by twofold genocide of the Murle and the Nuer by each other in a series of revenge attacks, beginning with the Nuer in early 2020. Many thousands are still facing governmental and militant genocide in the country. of the documented cases, 21 were accused of rape, gang rape, forced marriage, forced nudity, sexual slavery, and attempted rape. Victims included girls as young as 10, pregnant and lactating women, and psychosocially disabled children. And most cases, unfortunately, did not have their perpetrators penalized, and their victims did not get enough government aid. That was one of the most complex genocide timelines ever. But not every tale is this dark and dismal. Even in a place like South Sudan, there are always tales of hope, of reconciliation, of humanity. As they say, if a few drops of an ocean are dirty, the whole ocean is not dirty. That is humanity. I must take my hat off, if I were wearing one, to those brave aid workers in South Sudan from the Médecins Sans Frontières, the United Nations Peacekeeping Forces, the UNMISS, and the Red Cross, amongst many other organizations. Without their aid and protection, South Sudan would have fallen. South Sudan is an example of how international cooperation must work. We must not help those who are in power, since they don't need our help. We have to help those who can't help themselves, and that is exactly what MSF, the UNMISS, and the ICRC have done over these years. And not only those foreign organizations, but even local people have tried their best to come together and survive. Many have tried to reconstruct their villages, and many more have had to reconstruct their lives. All of this has happened thanks to the protection of civilians camps set up by the United Nations. What the United Nations has done cannot be expressed in mere words. So, what can we do? Support and help the United Nations. We must make sure that the South Sudanese genocide is not overlooked by trivial challenges such as Sino-American trade wars and petty politics. People in South Sudan are dying every day of torture, murder, raids, rape, and so much more. Everyone has a right to live in peace with dignity. Those in South Sudan don't get that right because of their luck, being born into the politics of chaos and power that has defined their country and life. Only the truth has the power to wield change and graft a new future for South Sudan, embodied by hope. Support us at Veritas Populi in sharing the facts, the flip side, and the face of things by liking and following our podcast. Share it with your friends and family and spread the truth, because the truth belongs to the people.